Okay, so we gotta talk about it. Over the past few days, we've seen half the country celebrating and half fuming.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him!
A rigged law in a rigged courtroom with a rigged jury.
Down goes Donald Trump! Down goes Donald Trump!
Hatred and fear dominate the Democrat ruling class.
I'm so goddamn libbed up today, dude. Let's go, baby.
Now, the legal case is an atrocity. It's a ridiculous, ridiculous case.
Woo! What a treat. What a treat. What a treat. What a treat.
It was a political put-up job.
Thank you to the criminal justice system for giving us this beautiful thing.
This is a trash case. It's an absurd case.
Thank you, Alvin Bragg Jr. Thank you, Judge Merchant, or whatever the his name is.
It's so obviously a stupid case.
Thank you to the Democratic Party.
This case is a fraud.
Thank you to New York City.
It was kind of a turducken of a charge.
Thank you to the jurors.
This thing was rigged from the start.
Dark Brandon strikes again.
This jury was rigged from the start. The judge rigged this thing along with the prosecutors.
There's no shortage of feelings, but let's talk about what we know about the Trump conviction. Starting with what everyone knows, right? The Manhattan jury found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in his hush money trial, which notably is usually just a misdemeanor, but in this case, it's a felony because they found that Trump did it for the purpose of illegally influencing the 2016 election. One of the biggest things with this, we need to be clear on this, is that nothing in the Constitution prevents him from running for office as a felon, even if he is sentenced to prison. Something that I've seen described by others as Air Bud rules. Because the premise of those movies is at some point someone's like, I mean, technically there's no rule about a dog playing basketball. Also connected to whether he goes to prison or not, his sentencing is set for July 11th, which notably is just days before Republicans are set to nominate him at their convention in Milwaukee. Though if you're wanting to see him in prison, I wouldn't get your hopes up because expert opinion generally seems to agree that time behind bars for him is going to be very unlikely. Right, regardless of what you think about Trump, on paper, he's a 77-year-old first-time white-collar offender, and his conviction is for nonviolent Class E felonies, which is the lowest level in New York. And that's without mentioning that he is a former president and a major party's presumptive nominee. But if the judge did give him prison time, each count actually carries a maximum sentence of 4 years. And I mean, there's 34 counts. So also that sentence would almost certainly be imposed concurrently, not consecutively, meaning that Trump's not going to go away for 136 years. I mean, even if it was done consecutively, New York law would cap that at 20 years for this type of felony. But remember, we're talking about what technically could happen, not what likely will. Though the more Trump acts like Trump between now and July 11th, the more likely it is that the judge could be harsher on him. I mean, he's already repeatedly attacked the judge, the jury, the prosecutors, the witnesses, the justice system as a whole. But then again, let's say that Trump gets prison time. Trump's lawyers are going to appeal the case as high as it'll go. I mean, possibly to the Supreme Court, right? And that would most likely postpone any kind of punishment beyond Election Day. Also, other potential sentences could include probation, which would mean that he'd need permission from a parole officer to travel outside the state. Or we could just see a simple fine or a conditional discharge pegged to the requirement that he stay out of further legal trouble. Or, I mean, he could technically get community service. But really, we're not going to know how this is going to go until the 11th. Which brings us to one of the next things we have to talk about, and that is that Trump and his allies have made a bunch of false, baseless, or at least misleading claims about the trial that are being spread online. Things like the assertion that this was orchestrated by the Democratic Party and President Biden. But while we wait to see what sentence comes down on the 11th, we should definitely also talk about how this is going to affect the election. Or to be more precise, will this verdict persuade enough voters to shy away from Trump, right? Will this affect the voting? Well, the answer there is we really won't know until Election Day, so vote how you want to vote, disregard the polls generally. But also, if we look at the polls, you're getting a bunch of different numbers depending on how you phrase the question. Or with early polling from before the news broke, putting the increase in Biden's margin between 5 and 14 points. With one survey in April finding that a conviction would make 20% of Trump supporters at least reconsider their vote, and 4% would actually change it. Also, another one last month found that Trump without a conviction led Biden by 4 points, but Trump with a hypothetical conviction trailed Biden by 4 points. But then yet another poll finding that significantly more people would abandon Trump if he was incarcerated, not just convicted. But, you know, saying and doing are very different things, and people's thoughts and feelings about all this are liable to change in the coming months, especially because everyone's perceptions on this case and what's at stake here in this election, they're going to be shaped by the media they consume. And so we've seen many conservatives working hard to discredit the entire trial as rigged, arguing that this whole thing is a top-down conspiracy to subvert democracy and prevent Trump from ever stepping foot near the Oval Office again.
If they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone.
Well, we'll have to wait to see if that's going to help him at the polls. I mean, it is definitely helping him financially. For example, his campaign announcing that it raised $53 million in the 24 hours after his guilty verdict, which, just to put that into perspective, that nearly matches in a single day what his fundraising arm raked in over the last 6 months of 2023. And the conviction has also prompted virtually the entire Republican Party, including some critics like Susan Collins and Mitch McConnell, to rally behind the former president. With, for example, one of the few who didn't, former Maryland governor and current Senate candidate Larry Hogan, getting ripped to shreds by Trump's allies online. Also, with all this, I know there are people that are going to mention there's still 54 more criminal charges and 3 other cases against Trump, or with those related to his mishandling of classified documents and his efforts to overthrow the 2020 election. But the key thing there is those are unlikely to go to trial before November. And if he gets elected president, I mean, he can just squash 2 of those cases because they're federal. So everyone, it is officially time to buckle up because we got 5 more fucking months of this at least.